Mark, thank you so much for having me here. I'm absolutely delighted to be here and to be talking to someone in my hometown of Cape Town.
And in person for a change.
And in person for a change. I'm normally on the other side of that screen. So absolutely lovely.
Yeah,
a real live person interviewing me. Thank you so much.
Nice to have you here in the Moyo studio with us this evening. And I have to say, before we even get started, I'm about halfway through the book and I'm thoroughly enjoying it. I might not be your exact target market. I thought I'd just read a chapter or two, but it's really nicely written and great storyline. So I'm really excited to delve into that. But before we get to this, because the story is about a psychotherapist who has a spiritual awakening while she's working in London. You're a psychotherapist. You've had a spiritual awakening. How did it start for you?
Okay, it started a little bit differently for me than it did for Katie in the book. So I always think it's difficult to pinpoint exactly when a spiritual journey starts. And I think for many of us, we're probably born into it. We probably chose it. Our souls chose it. And so I think if I look back to my childhood, there were sort of probably certain indicators that I was probably going to have this kind of spiritual journey. One was that I had an imaginary friend. Of course, my mum would say, you know, well, you're just imagining that. But I think I was probably channeling something then. And then, of course, that gets programmed out of you. You know, you're not supposed to have an imaginary friend and talk to yourself, are you? So that kind of goes aside. My grandmother was very psychic and she used to tell the tea leaves. And she used to have lots of old wives' tales about what you should and shouldn't do. And she knew what kind of herbs to use for things. So they had that kind of influence in my life as well. But at the same time, I grew up in quite a challenging family. I was the only girl, and I had 3 older brothers and a younger brother. And the 3 older brothers used to just tease me and humiliate me. It'd be quite nasty to me, actually. So I kind of just learned to I felt please people, I suppose, going into that people-pleasing thing, trying to fit the mold, trying to be what other people wanted me to be. And certainly in that very masculine environment with a father who was an engineer, it wasn't really a good thing to say that you had any kind of spiritual beliefs. You really had to just go with your 5 senses. So it was something that I ended up hiding. Yeah. And so you grow up, and during teenage years that I felt quite different to other people, felt as if I was on the periphery, but was always fascinated by folklore and natural things and the earth and casting spells and tarot and that sort of thing, I guess was where it all started when I was in my teenage years. And then I think with a lot of people who are on a spiritual journey, when I got to the sort of about the age of 20, 21, and moved to London, I wanted to fit in with everybody else. And it was in the 80s when everybody was, supposed to go and make money and everybody was going to be successful. And it was those Thatcher years. And I wanted to just fit in with other people. So I kind of, that fake it till you make it. So I kind of faked it till I made it. But the trouble with that is that you're really wearing a mask. You're not being true to yourself. So you've got this mask and you're then searching for the genuine self inside. And things go a little bit wrong. You feel a little bit empty. I felt like I was on a treadmill. And actually some of the inspiration for Katie, although she's much, much older, was taken from those early years of mine, kind of living in London and pretending to be somebody that maybe I wasn't, and feeling like a fraud underneath as well and a fake. And also going through some pretty bad relationships, really terrible, awful relationships, which left me quite wounded. And then what really, really set me on my spiritual path, I know for a lot of people, it's often something like a shocking thing, like a bereavement or a terrible accident or an illness. But for me, it wasn't any of those. It was a joyous thing. It was having my first child, my daughter. And I had Lottie, her name is, at the age of 30. And then 2 years later, I had my son. And that really woke me up, and I just made the decision that I perhaps didn't have the best role models of my parents. I mean, I don't want to sort of say anything against my parents. I know that we chose them as spiritual people. We absolutely choose our parents. I've forgiven them. I love them unconditionally. In fact, my mother's passed away. My father's now in his 90s. But it was a challenging childhood, and I realized that they weren't great role models, and I wanted to be a really good mum, and I wanted to do it differently. And I realized that I had to kind of start to reflect I'd done a little bit of self-reflection, but I needed to go much deeper. So that's what really set me on this path. And in fact, what happened is I had this kind of dual path. On the one hand, I was still interested in the esoteric. Became very interested in feng shui and also working with energies in houses. But at the same time, I went and had therapy. I went and had counseling because I realized there were things in my childhood that needed to be resolved. So that was really the beginning of this searching for the true self, which I think is where a spiritual journey begins.
Okay, so at that age, at 30, when your daughter was born, you weren't a psychotherapist yet?
Not yet, no. At that time, I had previously worked in public relations, completely different career, and had worked for a big public relations company in London and absolutely hated it. In fact, sort of at the age of 17, 18, I thought that's what I wanted to do, go into PR or marketing or advertising or possibly television. I thought it would be some media type thing that I wanted to go into. And so I fought very hard to have this incredible PR career. In fact, I worked in the film PR for a long time, and then it's top 10 PR company. And it was a real hollow victory because I found myself working at reasonably high level in this very well-known public relations company and thinking, what's this about? I can't even get out of bed in the morning. Yeah. So the therapy journey didn't start until after the children. So I had about 2 years of therapy myself. And during that time, I was also pursuing spiritual things. In fact, I was working as a feng shui consultant. And it got to the point where I'd go to people's houses and they'd have all kinds of issues. And I would think, I don't know whether fixing their house is going to fix it, because I don't know whether it's the chicken or the egg. See, I don't know whether they've chosen this house that's got, say, a bad relationship corner, and then that's manifesting a bad relationship. Or did they move into this house and that's created the relationship problem? I'm just taking that as an example. So it made me realize I wanted to delve deeper. And that's really what set me on that course. I first of all learned about NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, and then realized it wasn't really enough. And then I was doing healing as well. I was a healer, and somebody came to see me once and I was doing a healing with her, and she asked me if I would do some NLP. And it went into kind of a therapy session, and I said to her, look, I'm really sorry, I'm not a therapist. I'm not a qualified therapist, and I'm not insured as a therapist either. So I can't really take you down this path. And she said, I've seen so many therapists and counselors, and I would like you to do this, and I take full responsibility. So I said, fine. So I did a session with her, and she had this phenomenal shift, and she said, this has been amazing. So, well, if I can do that without any training, I should go get trained. So that's what started me off on the path of psychotherapy. And quite quickly moved into more alternative energy type healings like hypnotherapy and the eye movements, which is EMDR for trauma work, and I actually ended up with this kind of whole toolbox of therapies which I would weave together for different clients. So that was a whole journey as well.
And then how did the path go deeper for you with the spiritual material? I mean, you speak about working with the Course in Miracles and the Keys of Enoch. When did that come into your experience?
Well, Keys of Enoch came before A Course in Miracles, actually. I bought the book A Course in Miracles, and it sat on my bookshelf, which I think a lot of people do that. They buy it, it sits on the bookshelf, and it's quite inaccessible. So it sort of sits there for ages. And also, I was a very busy person in London. I was running a business, working in Harley Street in the end, 2 teenage children, and like Katie, was in a challenging marriage and then divorced and looking after 2 teenage children and running a business. So I never had time to kind of delve into that kind of teaching. So I think once you've chosen a spiritual journey of awakening, the steps unfold for you. It's that whole Joseph Campbell thing, walls that were there are no longer there. You're going on a hero's journey, and it's as if your higher self or your guides or the divine or source or whatever you want to call it, or whatever actual level is working with you, it's kind of got a gentle hand on your back and is pushing you forward. So books come into your air, into your aura. People will talk about them. Then there's courses, and it just keeps stepping one to the other. Then there's somebody who knows somebody who you need to do this, and this is very much how the book is written. And I think that is how spiritual paths work. So I was going deeper and deeper into all kinds of things. Keys of Enoch, I think the keys come to you when you're ready, and the keys came to me through 3 other different teachings that I went to. One was called Guidon Heart, which was like a visualization of some of the aspects within the keys, but very simplified. But it was a beautiful teaching and I really enjoyed it. Then there was another one called Magnified Healing, which also came from the Keys of Enoch. And then, of course, the Reconnection, which a lot of people know about, which also came from the Keys of Enoch. Because if you read the original book, The Reconnection, Eric Pearl talks about how he goes into this arcane teaching, and it's the Keys of Enoch. I think it's key 317 that talks about the axiotonal lines and the healing, which is the reconnection. So I'd done all three of these healings, and each of them had referenced the Keys of Enoch. And then when I did magnified healing, I did the kind of top level that you can do. And the woman that, sorry, I don't remember her name, that was a long time ago. The woman who, Giselle, that was her name, Giselle King, I think, ran it with another lady. Anyway, she came over to Europe, she was American, she came over to Europe to do the sort of master level, teacher's master level. And she just said to me, you need to study the Keys of Enoch. So I went home and ordered it and bought it, and that was about 15 years ago. And I just was fascinated. This book arrived actually in the post while I was on holiday. Yeah. And I got back and there was this huge pile of post, and we'd come back with, 2 kids and suitcases and everything. When you come home from holiday, there's everything that needs to be done. And I just sat there, ripped open this thing, and could not, I was transfixed. I could not take my eyes off this book. Within the keys, there are things called glyph pages, which are the actual key, and they're written in a script with a kind of flame above each letter. And I was just transfixed by reading those. And there's also some color plates and what we call cosmograms within there. So I was fascinated by those, totally inaccessible to read. So I had to find a study group in London, and I found my study group in London and never looked back. And I'm still studying now, and I teach a group, and I feel like I've just scratched the surface. I mean, I've been doing it for 15 years, and there's people here in South Africa who've been studying for 35 years. So I'm a baby. It's fascinating.
In a nutshell, what are the Keys of Enoch?
Oh my goodness. Okay,
because I've looked at the website, I've tried to work out what it is. What is this?
It's so funny because somebody else asked me in an interview, and that interview was recorded, and another person who's on my study group watched the interview and said, oh wow, that was a brilliant explanation of what the Keys of Enoch was. I wish I could remember what it was now. But actually what it is I would say it's a teaching rather than a book. That's the first thing. And for me, through all of my journey in searching, it's the highest level of teaching and the highest level of truth that I have ever found. It's called a capstone teaching, so that it incorporates all other scriptures and teachings, if you like, and it's capping that at the top, and it's coming down from a higher level. So it incorporates, for example, it's quite a bit of Kabbalah and the tree of life. There's a lot of Hebrew in there. It's also got the Christ and the cosmic Christ. We talk about angelics and Metatron, because it's actually the Keys of Enoch and Metatron. There's the Tibetan Bon tradition in there. There's the Egyptian philosophies in there as well. So it covers a lot of different things. But what it actually is, Dr. Hurtak, who wrote the teaching, had a metaphysical experience in 1973 where he was literally taken off the planet in the light body of Enoch. Now, it does sound crazy, but the keys is so precise and so incredible that you have to believe that something like that happened. Yeah. And the more you delve into it, the more you absolutely know this happened. And he was then taken and he was given these scrolls into the third eye, and he came back and he had to write them. And what they are, there are 64 keys of future science. Now 64 is an interesting number, and we talk a lot about numbers within the keys, or gematria. And if you think about the Yi Ching, there's 64 of those, and there's 64 codons in our DNA. So it's a very interesting number. But he was told to only publish the first 54. So he published those in 1973. And he was told, although he was given them in 1973, not to publish the last 10 until the consciousness of man was right, until he was given the sign by what he calls upstairs. So 6 years ago now, he was in the Golan Heights, and a great beam of light appeared to him, and there's pictures of that. And he was told, okay, it's time to issue these last 10. And the last 10 are called the light picture superscripts, and they form a hypersphere around the original keys. The whole thing is multidimensional. And when we think of multidimensions, it's not just rungs on a ladder. So if you think about, say, a point that you make with a pencil on a page, that would be a 0 point. And then if you put 2 points and join them together, you've got a line. Now that's one dimension. you put two lines and join that, and you've got a square. Now we're into 2 dimensions. And if you take that square and make a cube, you're into 3 dimensions. So it's a different, you've got to get your head around that. So when we go into 4th dimension, a 4th dimensional cube, you can look it up. It's called a tesseract. You can look it up online if you want to look at it. And it's a cube inside a cube, and they move around each other. So imagine what it gets like when it gets into sort of 24 dimensions. It goes beyond what we can really imagine. So the keys is a multidimensional teaching written on 7 levels, from the subatomic to the superluminal. So it's vast, vast teaching, and you can go into a rabbit hole with it and look at one little bit and just get lost. And yeah, so this year is Key 406 will be issued. So they're in series. So you've got the 100 series, which pertain to creation and the Father universe, the 200 series, which pertain to what has been created. So we call it the Son, S-O-N universe, is because they're plural and they're many. And then the 300s is called the Shekinah, which is the inner, it's the implicate order, it's the quantum physics of the whole thing, but it's really about the Shekinah, which is the presence of God or the Holy Spirit. And then the 400s are these new ones that are coming out, which are actually the 10 commandments of light. Yeah, so very complex teaching, very deep, very, very high level. And I think it probably, you take a lifetime and you're putting pieces of a huge jigsaw together. And the more you study, the more you can spend time with it, the more you understand it. But it's not just left brain. There's a lot of also working with love, working with meditation, with prayer, with vibrations we've been given and gifted by Dr. Hertak, and from the Bible and from other scriptures as well. Lots of sacred names and sacred chants that we can work with to raise vibration. Really the keys, they're unlocking the consciousness in your mind. Yeah. So it's an unlocking, but it's also a preparation for what is to come. Yeah. Well, that really does sound fascinating. It's fascinating. You've got to get your head around it. And quite out there. But if we had to bring things in a little bit, tell us about the bone circle. The bone circle as a teaching mechanism that you use with some of your clients or your students. Well, while the keys of Enoch is right out there, the bone circle is much more witchy and down here. So the bone circle is a training that I developed out of the different areas of my expertise. So it's sort of like 3 areas of my expertise, and where they overlap is the bone circle. But to give it a headline, if you like, it's an absolutely unique training. It's completely transformational. And if you do this training, I can guarantee that things will shift and change. Not maybe on the outside, which is what a lot of trainings do, teach you to go and, I don't know, buy a big sports car, or, you know, have your fabulous job or that sort of thing. No, it starts off actually by shifting things inside of you, work a lot with structures. So it's absolutely transformational. And what it really does in essence is it teaches you how to create the life you love. How to create the life you've come here to live, and which includes what your soul has come here to do. And it's always tapping into your passions, what you love, your skills and your talents, and how you create that. And more importantly, how you stop sabotaging yourself, because we all sabotage ourselves. So you learn that you have a small self, which is there to keep you safe. That's really the ego self, the conditioned self. And we don't get rid of the ego, actually. We just get it in alignment with your greater self, so that it's serving you, so that it becomes the servant to your greatness. So then you have a greater self. But way that I teach it is that we are a luminous greater self, a divine being. That's what we are. And we have a smaller self, which is this earth suit, and it's keeping us safe. And it has all these skills, like it's able to interview people or speak or type or write a book or whatever, you know, your skills and talents are, belonging to in the domain. Even if you think about a really great musician or a really great artist, they have to learn the technique of music notation or painting an oil painting, and then their greatness is the inspiration which comes through that small self to paint that picture. So it's very much about living the life you came here to live. And within those 3 parts, we've got looking at drawing on my experience as a therapist and a healer. So we're looking at, what did you get programmed to do when you were a kid? What is your Enneagram? What's your orientation in life? What are the big programs and structures that hold you back? You're never going to get rid of them all, and we don't have to. But if there's few that are really anchoring you back into the past, then there's some techniques to resolve those. But a lot of it is just becoming aware. So as soon as you can become aware of something that's been in your shadow, then you can go, that's that old chestnut. I don't need to listen to that. So a lot of it is just about not ignoring, but acknowledging that that small self is jumping up and down and going, what, you're going to write a book? Are you crazy? Or whatever it's saying, and go, yeah, I know. Yeah, I hear you, but I'm going to do it anyway. So that's really looking at the past. And then the other sector is sort of drawing on the metaphysics and the keys of Enoch and the yoga and all of these things. And we do a little bit of dance in the bone circle just with the beginning of each session, just to get people into their body to express themselves very freely to music. We work with prayer and sacred expressions as well. So it's, and just being in the now, being present, meditation, healthy lifestyle, drinking lots of water, eating well, looking after the planet, those sorts of things, which are all about being in the present. And then the final circle, if you like, is about the future. And that's really tapping into intuition. And I teach people a way of tapping into their intuition at will, because a lot of people, their intuition comes in fits and starts. It's like a radio that's not quite tuned in, isn't it? And it comes in and then you don't know whether, is that my intuition or is that this? And it's confusing. And so I teach you a way to actually tap into intuition and know that's your intuition, intuitive voice and your intuitive knowing. And then from that intuition, that's how you can tap into what your soul's come here to do, because it's all connected. And then you intuitively know what steps to take and what actions to take to create your vision. So it's about how to create, and whether that's creating a book or creating a life, or whether it's creating a career or a relationship, or whether that's painting your kitchen or something, or baking a cake, whatever it is that you set out to do is a creation. And it's about how the mechanism of that works. And it's not just about sort of cosmic ordering or The Secret. There is a bit of that in it. That's manifesting. And you do manifest when you start creating, but there's also action to be taken. So there's forms the main thrust of the training, is how do you create what you would love? And how do you stop the sabotage? And how do you know what you would love? And how do you know what your true north is? And that's your intuition. And the reason it's a circle is that you all support each other. You can't do it on your own. It's like the hero's journey, the film, like Harry Potter, he can't do it on his own. He needs Hermione and Ron, doesn't he? And all the whole cast of people that are helping him. It's the same when you come and do the bone circle training. It's a hero's journey and a heroine's journey. And I teach you all about those. And you need your hero partners. And I say bone sisters because there's been women up till now, but it's now open to men. So you need those people to help you. So in a circle, no one person is higher up, or there's no hierarchy. Basically, everybody's equal and everybody has the chance to contribute to that circle. And it's the bones, because it's going back to the bones. So it's stripping back to the bones, and the bones are always there, and the bones are your deeper self, and the bones are also the framework or the structure. So, and we look a lot at structures, particularly hidden structures. That's the bone circle.
That really does sound quite fascinating. So before we move on, I just want to remind the audience that you have an opportunity to win a copy of Bridget's book right here between us. And just before we wrap things up tonight, we'll be putting a question to the audience. And if you get the question right, you might be the person who wins a copy of this book. So moving on to the book, from what I've gathered so far, and I'm about halfway, you introduce a lot of these spiritual tools and spiritual concepts quite gently in through the book. What was your inspiration to actually write this book in the first place?
Okay, so sort of I'll answer that in two parts, if you don't mind. The first thing is that my end result or vision for the book was to do exactly what you've just described. So I'm very pleased that that's happened for you, because what I wanted to do was write a fun novel that was a bit of a page turner, that's accessible and entertaining, and in it would be woven all these spiritual pearls of wisdom. And you can take them or not. You can, and there's scenes where one of the other characters might be thinking the opposite. And it's, you can decide as the reader which side you're on, and you can decide as the reader if there's something in there that you want to dip into, because every single spiritual thing that's in there is authentic. From the way she meditates, she's a Reiki master, all of the different things that she does, SRT, for example, spiritual response therapy, that's a real thing. And if you fancy doing it when you read the book, you can go and Google that and go and do a course. So everything in there is genuine and authentic, and I wanted to get that. That was my end result of the book, for it to be accessible. But what made me write the book was a completely different thing. I didn't write it. I didn't actually sit there thinking, I'm going to write a really good novel that's accessible and fun and readable with lots of spiritual wisdom. That's not how it works. And wasn't also one of those people who's always had a book inside them. So what happened was, way back when I lived in London, I've lived here now for 9 years. So I'm talking about 12, 13, 14 years ago. It was another friend of mine from London who studied the keys, and she used to say to me, you know, you're going to write a book, don't you? And I'd go, yeah, you know, and she was one of those friends, but she was so convincing, and she'd say it very matter-of-factly, like, well, when you write your book. And so she said it so often, and she was actually really intuitive, and her husband was an amazing healer as well. And I just thought, maybe she's got something here. And in my head, I would panic, because I think, well, I'm so busy and I'm burning out, and you know, when am I going to write a book? And I don't know anything about writing a book. I do know how to write because I worked in public relations. I used to write sort of articles and things like that, and I've written websites and I've written things as a therapist, but I didn't know how to write a book. So I would just kind of scribble a few ideas down and then leave it at that, and it didn't go anywhere. So then I kind of burnt out, went on this training in my intuition, which part of that training comes into the bone circle, and it guided me to come to Cape Town. Now, bear in mind, I'd never been to South Africa in my life, never been to Cape Town in my life, and I didn't know anybody here, and I moved. I did end up knowing 3 people, actually, in the end, because they were introduced to me before I moved. So I arrived, and I kind of was recovering from burnout, and I had a week in a backpackers lodge in town, and then I moved to Komaki, because I wanted to just chill on the beach and sleep and walk on a beach and do nothing, you know, and it was October time, so it was just coming into summer. It was nice and warm. And as far as I was concerned, it was a long holiday, and then I would decide whether I was going to go back to England or whether I was going to stay here. So I'm living in this house in Komaki, not far from the beach, and I don't know anybody. And I vaguely know a couple of people, but nobody in Komaki. And I decided to have a Skype catch up with a friend of mine, and he's also very intuitive, and he said, you know, you're going to write a book. And I thought, oh, no, not this again, this old chestnut. And so I kind of like, and they kept going, no, listen to me. I'm telling you. People would pay me a lot of money for this advice, and I'm giving it to you for free because you're my friend. But I'm telling you, you're going to write a book, and that's your path of least resistance. So I went, okay. So again, ignored him. Within about half an hour of that phone call, somebody knocked on my door. So I look out the window to check, who is this person knocking on my door? I open the door, and it's a guy, and he's standing there, and he said, I'm your neighbor from across the road. It's my wife's birthday. We're having a braai. Would you like to come over and join us? We know you're new in the neighborhood. So I said, yeah, I'd love to. Thank you. So I pitch up at 7 o'clock with my bottle of wine. And it turns out that his wife was an author and was about to finish her, I don't know how many novel, and a lot of people, I won't say everybody there, but almost everybody there was either a writer, an author, an editor, or they taught creative writing or English at Cape Town University. So I thought, this is a sign, you know, I have to do this. And then it was a matter of resistance for a while, and I do a lot of intuitive coaching, and I was doing swaps, and it just kept coming out, no, you've got to write this book. And then as I worked with my intuition, I was getting very, very clearly, no, you're not going to just write sort of 7 steps to a spiritual life or something like that. You are going to write a novel. You're going to write a fiction. And that scared me. So yeah, took it from there.
Well, why do you think a novel rather than a nonfiction?
I think it was because well, my hope is that it reaches people that maybe a nonfiction won't. There are loads of wonderful, brilliant books out there. Fabulous books, so many that it's difficult to. I actually had to do top 10 spiritual books for somebody recently, and it was really hard to just choose 10. And I'm sure that would be a snapshot. Tomorrow it would be different. But there's loads and loads of great books. Now, the sort of people who read those books are dedicated to their journey, are already on a spiritual journey and already want to read, you know, The Power of Now or Conversations with God or 7 Spiritual Laws to Success, or Course in Miracles, or whatever it is that you're reading, you want to read them, and you set aside that time to really learn and grow with it. But a lot of people don't want to do that. They don't want to delve into a spiritual book. They want to read novels. Now, I used to only ever read a novel if I was on holiday, because the rest of the time I'd be reading spiritual books. And even then I'd be like, well, I just need to finish off this spiritual book. And then if I finish that and I've got a bit of time, I might read my novel. And then to actually sit and read a novel was a huge luxury. So I thought, well, what if we could have the luxury of reading a novel, having a laugh with it, having some fun with it, and learning and growing at the same time? And my hope really is to open the minds of people who are maybe just dipping their toes into these waters. I think for people who've been on a spiritual journey like yourself, you'll get it. You'll get all the in jokes, and you'll absolutely understand it, and you'll enjoy it because you're almost with her on that path. But if you've kind of just maybe started to open your mind to there's more to life than our 5 senses, then this is a great book to start you off, you know, rather than diving straight into something like Course in Miracles or the Keys of Enoch. It's nice, gentle introduction.
So one of the things that Katie does in the book is she goes for a soul reading where she gets her soul path read to her. And in the book, Katie's told that she would be speaking to an audience.
Yes.
I'm wondering, have you done this soul reading, and was writing a book perhaps in there or something else?
Yes, I have done the soul contract reading, and I will let you into a secret. I'm probably not sure you've guessed. The soul contract in the book is written as Katie's, but in actual fact, it is my soul contract. Partly because I want to completely make up a whole new soul contract for somebody. So her soul contract, as you see it in the book, you don't see the whole thing, obviously, but it is essentially my soul contract. It's quite a funny piece as well. It's not too serious. I read it actually for not the launch, but another interview, because it's quite, and when as I read it, it was so interesting, Mark, because right at the end of this scene, she's gone, and Katie's on this path, by the way, with some trepidation. She's not sure whether she wants to do it. She's hanging on the fence, isn't she? She's sitting on the fence, and she's kind of very self-deprecating, you know, and she's saying, oh, I don't know if I believe in this, and she's quite critical, and that's not like me at all. That's very different to me. But she eventually goes off to have this soul contract reading. She doesn't really believe it, and she's kind of sitting on the fence with it, and then she gets drawn in, and then right at the end, the lady that's doing the soul contract reading for her, called Dina, says, well, it tells her all about her soul contract, this fabulous soul contract where she's going to be speaking on a stage, public speaking for a new evolution in consciousness. And she says, but you can't do that with your current name. At which point Katie says, no, this is ridiculous, I'm not changing my name. And then right at the end, she says, well, you know, maybe you could change your surname, and if you don't want to change your name. And she said, because it would be a pity, because otherwise you'd have to come back. And Katie says, what, for another reading? And Dina says, no, for another incarnation. So I'm reading this the other day, and I'm thinking, hang on, this is my soul contract. And I got, you know, that moment when your hairs go on end and you get goosebumps. And I'm thinking, hang on a minute, this is my soul contract that I've written into a fictionalized story, and I kind of just made a fun thing of it. But now I'm reading it back to myself, I'm realizing that actually I do have to fulfill this contract, otherwise I'll have to come back for another incarnation. So it was quite it's like the penny dropping at a deeper level.
I was very interested in the name change thing and the impact that had on the character. Have you changed your name, and did you feel an impact?
My original birth name is Bridget Finklaire. But when I had my soul contract read, I was married, and my name was Bridget Herbert. And also, I was on my birth certificate, it's Finklaire, exactly as you see it on this book. But when I was about 9 or something, I found these old letters in my mother's dressing, in a box underneath my mother's dressing table, and on it, it was spelled F-I-N, and with a hyphen and a capital K, L-A-I-R-E. And I said to my mum, who sent these letters? They spelled our name wrong. She said, well, actually, no, because this is how it's meant to be spelled. And I said, what? And she said, this is from your grandmother on my father's side, and this is how the name is spelled. But your father decided it was just such a hassle spelling it and putting the hyphen in and all the rest of it, that he just dropped it and turned it into Finklaire because it was easier. So I said to her, well, can I start using it that way? And she said, yeah, sure. So there was a big kerfuffle at school because they said your daughter started to write her name differently. And my mum went, no, she's actually writing it correctly. So I had it with the hyphen. So then I married and I was Mrs. Herbert. And when I had my soul contract read, I actually changed it back to Finklaire, but on my original birth certificate.
Okay. So did you feel that energetic shift in your life?
Yeah.
Did it change things for you?
I did. And I think actually, I'd say this to people, that if you are thinking of changing your name, please be careful and do it intuitively, because I've known people who've just decided, I know, I'm going to change my name. And often it's an Indian name. I had a friend, her name was Julia. She decided to change her name to Jagat, Jyoti, and, you know, and she's back to Julia, she's actually German. But people change their names and then all kinds of weird things happen to them. Yeah. And they go on a bit of a roller coaster because you've got to ground that vibration. So be careful if you're going to change your name, know what you're doing. So yeah, for me, when I changed it to Herbert, that's when I really started burning out and getting really, really busy. And everything changed. It was just very bizarre because I'd had a very unusual name for so long and then having a much more normal name. So that was weird. And I remember a guy once came to the house, I can't remember who it was, like a decorator or somebody, and they just went, is that your married name? Because it doesn't really go, does it? Like Bridget Herbert doesn't really go. And I just thought, oh, that's interesting. And then when I changed it back to Finklaire, I was quite a long way on the spiritual journey by then, and it completely ungrounded me. I felt floaty. I just felt like I was out of my head. I felt like I was stoned or something. I just felt so floaty and completely and utterly ungrounded. And I went through this sort of 3-month period of having to ground that name.
Yeah. I wonder if people have that experience, mostly women, when they get married.
Yeah.
But it's perhaps, you know, in the excitement of getting married, they don't realize that, you know, the name change is actually having an impact on their life.
I guess it's going to depend on several factors. I mean, first of all, are they awake at all? Because that's going to make a massive difference. So they're going to feel that. Because, for example, I can't really go into a shopping mall for very long because of the electronics, but most people can. But it's just because we become more sensitive as we awaken. So that's the first thing. If you're more awake, then you probably notice it more than if you're not. And the second thing is, how in alignment is that name for you? So if that was always part of your soul purpose to marry that man and take his name, then you'll probably slide gently into it. Or if it's nothing to do with your soul purpose and you completely married the wrong person, you probably won't make any difference to your energy, maybe. I don't know. It's a really interesting question. I don't actually know the answer, but I suspect that the reason I got ungrounded is I was meant to reclaim my original name of Finklaire as for the next stage of my spiritual journey. So I think if it's done in awareness as part of a spiritual path, then you're going to notice the difference. But I do know people who've said that I don't know if anybody out there listening knows this, that sometimes you'll have a couple who've been together forever, you know, they're not married, but they're partners, and maybe they've been together for 20 odd years or something, and they're perfectly happy and everything's going swimmingly, and then they suddenly decide for whatever reason that they're going to tie the knot, and they get married and the woman changes her name, and then the relationship takes a nosedive, and it's because of the vibration of the name. So if you're out there and you've been with your partner for years and you think you get married, please go ahead and get married, but keep your name.
Good advice. So staying with the book, one of the interesting parts of the book is the voice. Now, this reminded me very much of Conversations with God, and I have no doubt that whilst you were writing, you were having a wonderful channeling experience, because some of the wisdom is really quite special. What was it like for you doing that? It was really interesting. I mean, it wasn't directly channeled, but when you're writing a book, I think anybody who's writing a novel has the muse, and that muse really is a channeling, whoever's writing. So all sorts of amazing things come out once you start writing, because it's a perfect balance of left and right brain. You've got to think about the structure and the grammar and the spelling and how it's working and how you're going to, and typing it and all the rest, or writing it.
but there's also something intuitive that comes through at the same time. And sometimes you write something and you go, oh, wow, that was clever. Where did that come from? So it wasn't as if I sat there and actually channeled the voice and then wrote it. A lot of what the voice says is stuff that I know, from my path and journey. But what really was fabulous was getting into characterization. So right at the beginning, the voice has got this 1930s accent, and she says, are you going to carry on talking with that 1930s accent? So it was terribly easy to get into this character of this voice. And once you get into the character of the voice, it was easy to kind of work out what he might say and how he might react and the words he might say. And then some of it does get channeled. So there's some lovely bits, like there's a bit where he goes, by Jehovah, you're getting it. And that just came out as I was writing. And it's obviously it's come from somewhere else. Yeah. So I think if you are writing channeled work and information, you have to be very careful that it's still accessible, because sometimes when things are channeled, they're done in a very arcane language or very old-fashioned terminology, and it's another being, if you like, speaking to you or speaking through you, and it's coming maybe from a voice from eons ago or another realm, and so it doesn't always lift off the page as a conversation. So you have to kind of get that balance right of letting things come through and bringing in that wisdom, marrying that to what you know, and still making it so that it's accessible for people who are reading those conversations that she's having with the voice.
Yeah. So I love writing it. One of the things that I love that comes from the voice is sort of about halfway, Katie's been struggling to connect to the voice for a while. And she's been struggling with the decision about whether or not to meet the ex-boyfriend from high school, and the voice isn't there and the voice isn't there. And then one afternoon, she does a meditation technique, connecting to the heart and doing some breathing and whatever. And then the voice comes back and she asks, well, where have you been? I needed you. And the voice says something along the lines of, you need to do this for yourself, or you need to start figuring things out for yourself. Yeah. And I think that's such an important bit of wisdom there. We kind of tend to want the answers from outside.
Yeah, completely. Well done spotting it. It's really good that you noticed that, because that's exactly right. And I like to think of the voice. If we look at, say, Joseph Campbell's hero's journey, if you think about Harry Potter, he's always got Dumbledore, but Dumbledore is not always there, or any of those, the Matrix and Morpheus is not always there. So it's that mentorship that's not always there, because they're teaching you to grow and be strong. And I believe we're all powerful beings. In fact, that is the first truth bomb that we use in the bone circle, is that you're a powerful creator and you're a powerful being. And so sometimes if we spoon feed too much, you're not allowing that person to grow. And we grow best when we make our own decisions and when we make our own mistakes. And also, I think there are some decisions that only we can make. We can't ask somebody else to make that decision for us. We have to go inside and dig deep. And it's not fair to ask somebody else either, because it is like a gateway moment for us, which way we're going to go. Is it the blue pill or the red pill? It's almost like that. So that's why I didn't want the voice to be telling her what to do about the ex. She had to make that decision herself. She had to grow and make that decision and internalize. And really, if you look at the voice, he's giving her bits of wisdom, but he never gives her advice. She takes what she wants from it. But if there's a decision to be made, she has to pull that out of herself and make it.
And that's kind of how it is with the voice, isn't it? I mean, the voice would never say, go and visit your ex.
No, that's right.
But it would also never say, don't go and visit your ex.
Yeah, because you've got to make your own
decision.
You've got to
make your own decision. You've got to, and I think the learning is how to do that. And the voice goes on to hint, follow your intuitive knowing rather than what you think and feel, which I found interesting. I'd like you to sort of expand on that a little bit.
That kind of feeds into the bone circle training. So when we think and feel things, very often we're thinking and feeling from our memory banks of what we've learned in the past. So it's something we've read or something somebody's told us. And we're going on what's happened in the past. So we're looking back to the past to refer back to the past. Also, a lot of thoughts and feelings are coming from our own conditioning in childhood. So, you know, if you feel very angry about something or very upset about something, it's something in your shadow. And it's invariably not about what's actually happening right now, but what's happening way back. So we'll often think things, but they're not necessarily true, because our thoughts can really fool us. So, for example, I don't know if you've ever been driving along at night and you see like a dustbin line at the side of the road. There's a body, you know, it's not, it's a dustbin line. So your thought and your feeling got it completely wrong there. And also, even if you're sort of making a decision, my stepson's just deciding to buy his first car, and he's got to weigh up the odds, you know, and of course all the thoughts are going, but I'm going to be spending all my money on this car, and you know, what about what X, Y, and Z? And so there's all these thoughts, and it's not very good to invest in a car because it depreciates. And these are all things that he's learned along the way in life. And then he's got, if he were to go on those thoughts and feelings, he'd probably get into a stranglehold. Luckily, he's been trained, so he can go by his knowing. And I think your knowing is your true intuition. You have a flash of knowing, don't you? I mean, the way that I teach it in the Bone Circle is, have you ever been driving somewhere familiar, like you're driving to work, or you're driving somewhere very, very familiar, and you hear a voice in your head, or you see a sign or something, because some people know, some people hear, some people see, and it says turn right or something, and you go, and you then rationalize it and go, no, but that's the long way round, and I need to get there, and I'm going to go straight on, and you ignore it. And then you go straight on, and there's a big accident and a roadblock, and you can't get through, and you go, why didn't I listen to that voice? Because that voice was your knowing, and then you rationalized it. So thoughts and feelings very often will rationalize based on past experience, whereas intuition is taking you into something new that you don't know yet, and can see far beyond what you can see. So listen to your knowing, not your thoughts and feelings. And we always say in the Bone Circle that your thoughts and feelings are not a true reflection of reality. It doesn't mean they're not real. It means they're not your true north. I could panic and think this thing with this interview this evening with Mark is going to be terrible, and I'm going to fluff all my lines, and it's going to be awful. And I could think that, and I could feel very, very nervous about it, and possibly I did. But to realize that's not the truth of it. That's just what I'm thinking and feeling, and that no, I'm going to choose to really enjoy this and have a great time with you talking. So
well, thank you very much. I hope you have had a great time.
I have indeed. I hope you have too, and I hope that everybody listening has.
I'm going to invite the audience to post any questions into the Q&A if you've got a question that you'd like Bridget to answer, or something about the book. And we're going to post a question for somebody who would like to win this copy of Red Dress. And the question is, I think the question should be, what is the name of Bridget's training program that you can join, the training program that Bridget facilitates? Now, it's been mentioned a number of times, so don't give it away again. Let's see if anybody knows what it is. And I'm trying to see if we've got a few correct answers in, but I think the first person to answer correctly was Emerald. Is that right? Emerald, I can't quite see your surname there, but Emerald, congratulations. Emerald Connection. Okay, we're going to have to see who. Emerald Connection, Simone Ayman. Have I pronounced that correctly? Simone, please send us an email, and congratulations to everybody else who has got the correct answer, the Bone Circle that is correct. But Simone Ayman, if you can email us to talks@moyocenter.com, and we'll arrange for your copy to be delivered to you. So congratulations all. So let's see if there's any questions coming from the audience. If anybody's got any questions about Red Dress, about Bridget's work, they're from Diane. Having moved into spiritual teaching, so you still find a use for psychotherapy. When and why?
Okay, interesting question. Just before I want to ask that question, I just want to say congratulations to Simone as well, and well done, and thank you for listening to all of that. So now let's look at Diane's question. I don't very much use psychotherapy anymore. I do have one client from London that's been with me a long time, and she had another little thing she wanted to work with, and I am working with her, but it's actually only once a month, and I've asked her already that we need to finish in November, because I feel I have moved on a long way. So for me to dive back into psychotherapy, I find it quite challenging, partly because of the vibration and the level that people are at, and often in a lot of fear and a lot of anger, and that's fine, that's where they are, and there's lots of fabulous psychotherapists and counselors and people out there who can help them. So that's one of the things, is going from a kind of high vibration and high level spiritual understanding to go back down to meet that client at their level. I find that quite difficult, and also that I feel as though that part of my life is complete. It's very much tied up with London. And so I just feel that part of my life as a psychotherapist is complete. And also because I have the spiritual journey as well, towards the end of my career in psychotherapy, I was using a lot of alternative techniques like hypnotherapy or EMDR or EFT or NLP or sometimes CBT, but not often. But so I was moving away into more alternative tools, if you like, anyway. I guess that you've always got that psychology mind if you've been a psychotherapist, and then it's easy to pick up on things. And in terms of the bone circle, it's still there because they're still looking at what's playing out in the shadow, what's stopping people, what's scaring them, what traumas are there that need to be resolved. And also, when you get into the advanced bone circle training, I work with a technique which takes people into the child inside to start to heal the past. And we also look quite in depth at the Enneagram and how that was formed and how that is actually sabotaging you. And unlike a lot of Enneagram programs, I don't say you've got to fix your Enneagram or be at the top of your Enneagram. We just say, no, the Enneagram is the structure of your smaller self. And then you've got a greater self. So what we do is we just see what's playing out in the Enneagram. And then anything from that Enneagram orientation that's useful is just a tool that greatness would then use. So I don't really use psychotherapy in its pure sense anymore. I feel that I've left that behind. Indeed, I think I'd be too rusty to actually take on a psychotherapy client now. And also I would need supervision, which I don't have here. So really, I feel that my own intuitive guidance is firmly taking me into the spiritual teaching. So I'm really all now about teaching the keys of Enoch, which is spiritual teaching the bone circle, which is more intuition and creating really, but a bit of spiritual stuff in there, and writing. And Red Dress it's a novel, it's a fiction, it's funny, it's a story, it's sad, it's got wisdom, but essentially it is a spiritual story. So that's kind of where I'm heading. But in Red Dress, she is a psychotherapist, and there are some scenes with her supervisor, her having therapy. And later on in the book, there's a character that's got love and sex addiction, and we see him go through 12-step. Well, we don't see the whole thing, but he's attending 12-step, and he's also going to the priory. So it's still drawing on those skills. I hope that answers your question.
Great, thank you, Bridget. There's another question from Jill asking if you have dealt with your shadow in the course of writing the book.
My personal shadow you mean a catharsis in writing it? I'm guessing that's what you're talking about. Yes, to some degree, yes, because the events of the novel are very loosely follow my life, and so it is kind of semi-autobiographical. It is a fiction, and there are fictional characters, and the story has got fiction in it, but there are also some true bits, like my soul contract being mine. So yes, it enabled me to work through some things that had happened in my life that I wanted to put to bed completely. But moreover, the act of writing a book brings up all kinds of stuff from your shadow, like, oh, am I good enough? I'm not good enough. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just a silly little girl who doesn't know anything. All of this stuff that was in my shadow. And so, yes, the act of writing does bring things up from the shadow to be seen and to be healed and to be released. So it has been, and bear in mind, it's taken me 7 years to write, in total, to write it, edit it, polish it, and get it published. So yes, over that 7 years, there's been a huge growth. Just even things like this work's going to go out to the world and what are people going to think? They're going to judge me. All sorts of stuff that we have in our shadow has surfaced through the writing of that book, that I've then been able to see it and process it and deal with it. So yeah, good question.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, because what was interesting in the book is as Katie's spiritual journey progresses, stuff starts coming up for her. And this is very true of anybody who starts a spiritual journey. The stuff starts coming up. You know, there's often the honeymoon phase. Oh, the stuff's amazing. I love this book. I feel like finally understood, or whatever. You know, somebody's on the same page as me. And then the past starts to surface, or the wounds start to surface. And it's quite well written in that way, I think, that, you know, Katie starts to have these memories coming up and these emotions surfacing, and she starts to use some of these tools, some that she had from a psychotherapy practice and some that she was learning.
Yeah, for sure. That's absolutely right. That I love what you've said, and I totally agree with you, Mark, that when you start off on the spiritual journey, it's really exciting. It's, oh, I'm going to go and do my Merkaba course, or I'm going to do my angel course, or whatever it is. I'm going to have gone and had a healing, or I've done my Reiki and I've got this feeling, and it's all exciting and bubbly. And then, you know, in that light, because really when you're starting on a spiritual path, you're awakening, you're becoming aware, you're becoming conscious, and then the light's coming in, and then it goes, oh, look at that, that's in there. So things start to come up. But as you said, it's the wound, and if we look at Rumi, the wound is where the light comes in. So if you can actually have the courage to face that and resolve those things, then that's really the path of where you're going to find a massive growth in consciousness and awareness, and also in happiness, general well-being, as you clear those things. Yeah, so that's again part of the bone circle, is that things will come up. And I think for reading the book, for some people things will come up, and some people may be able to handle that and welcome it. I think this is the thing, is to not be afraid when things come up, but to welcome it, because that's the next step in your journey to freedom, if you like. Things get better and better as they go on. So there may be things coming up, but we learn that you can overcome them, and in overcoming them, they get better. There's another truth bomb in the bone circle, and it actually comes from somebody else, and I'm sorry, I can't remember who originally said this, but it's pain is inherent and suffering is optional. So when we're asleep, we're in suffering constantly, and I see so many people suffer because they haven't faced the pain of resolving something. So it's an interesting dynamic.
Yeah, I think that's a good note for which to wrap things up tonight. So Bridget, thank you very, very much.
Mark, thank you so much. I've had a great time. I've so enjoyed it. Thank you all for watching and listening. Thank you so much for inviting me. I had a great time.
It's a pleasure.